Hey folks, what does the color yellow, Bach, and a cello all have in common? It turns out they can all play a role in reducing stress in cattle, and if we're reducing stress, we're increasing performance, right? Let's find out. Today, we are visiting with Kim Jungkind, and we are going to talk about her experience as a first-generation rancher, which is a unique story in itself, as well as how her curiosity has brought her to discover how cows respond differently to different kinds of music and different colors. And by the way, you're listening to Shaye Warner on the Casual Cattle Conversations podcast. Remember, you can find us on YouTube as well. So with that, let's visit with Kim. Grazing without limits, ranching without boundaries. Unlock the full potential of every acre with Vents, a smarter way to manage your cattle and land. Cut costs, conserve resources, control grazing across even the toughest terrain with virtual fencing that combines real-time herd data with powerful, hands-off precision. Profit, sustainability, and efficiency all in one system. Vents puts smarter grazing at your fingertips, saving you time, effort, and money compared to traditional fencing. Ready to transform your ranch? Learn more at ventsfence.com. Well, Kim, thank you for joining me today. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. And to start off, my first question for you is, why is it so important for ranchers to stay curious?
I think being curious is important to gain a really different perspective. There's always insights and new information that's available. So tapping into these insights can really help your cattle business. So take, for example, the insight that's gained by knowing that cattle can see the color yellow. And I found this out from some testing and then did some research and found out that they love yellow. They can actually see yellow the best. They can also see blue pretty good, but they love yellow. Knowing that, one company representative I spoke to recently in the Texas and Southwest Cattle Raisers Association conference, they changed the end of their cattle guides, or we call them sorting sticks, to the color yellow. They have a little flag at the end, now it's yellow, which is much better. The yellow flag at the end of the cattle guide stick catches the cow's attention, and they can actually have a less stressful experience, whether you're putting them in a cattle trailer or whatever. It's just better for the cattle, and it made so much sense. I was also curious about what kind of music my cattle preferred, and so I took some time and tried to find different kinds of music and see what they thought, how they reacted, and did jazz and country western and other kinds of music, and found out little by little that my herd of cows actually preferred the music of Bach. And I was really surprised. And I knew this because I had the music on my cell phone, which was connected to a boombox through a Bluetooth. And that's how I saw they came closer and closer to the boombox as they liked the music. So when I put on rock and roll, they went further away and sometimes ran. But when I got to Bach, for some reason, I started with Mozart, but I got to Bach, they came so close. They actually wanted to lick the boombox and the cell phone. So then I got it a little bit more tweaked, and then I found out that they were not so much into orchestral, but they liked the cello. And who better to play Bach cello music than Yo-Yo Ma? So now I have a herd of Yo-Yo Ma enthusiasts that I did not know. So they've been listening to it now for about 10 years, and they love it. I have it on when they're feeding and at stressful times, so when they're getting into the cattle trailer or something is stressful that's going on, a birth that's stressful, I put the music on and it calms everyone down because, the whole herd seems to get into whatever the issue is. And it's really been interesting. So, and of course, did more research about this. And from an economic point of view, the primary economic driver is stress reduction. There's a lot of information on this. And stress reduction helps prevent metabolic energy from being diverted away from weight gain. And weight gain is really important. So weight gain trumps everything. So we really want to make sure they continue with the weight gain and don't have stress.
Absolutely. And so for listeners out there, Kim talks about more of this process and the story behind it in her book, which we will also link in the description. It's an interesting story, and it's something that Kim is a very curious person and kind of came to herself. But I think part of that, Kim, is you didn't grow up on a ranch. So you came into ranching with kind of a clean slate, which a lot of us as generational producers do not. And so do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about what your lifestyle looked like prior to ranching, and then how you and your husband got into ranching?
I was a full-time trauma cardiac transplant nurse working in a very large hospital in Philadelphia. And at the time, I was working on my second master's degree, so very academic and hardworking. My husband was a professor and a director of microbiology labs in the same city. We lived in the suburbs. We commuted to the city, and our kids were preparing for college. Then all of a sudden, my husband's father died. He was a rancher, but we rarely got over to see him, maybe once a year for a couple of days. But the arrangements were made that the other side of the family, who were expert ranchers, would take over the ranch. It was kind of an obvious situation. But at the funeral, they decided to change, and they decided to see the world, and they gave the responsibility to us. And of course, we were totally shocked. And they had tickets for the next day to head to Europe. And we just looked at each other and said, we know nothing really at that time. We know kind of where it was, but we had to kind of look it up. We were moved to Texas and resumed the cattle operations without a lot of information and a lot of experience. We had actually no experience.
So one of the things I found a lot of things interesting in your book, because something like that would be a huge shock, especially since there were other family members who had experience with ranching. But in your book, it sounds like where you found help and support is, and correct me if I'm wrong, you went to find the ranch, you decided to go to church, and you found supportive members in the church you went to. Is that correct?
Yes. So we wanted to start ranching and carry on the family heritage. We felt like we were called. We had significant acreage. We didn't have any ranching experience, like I was saying. So we quickly decided to try to get help so we can get this ranch up and running. And decided the next day we were out there, and on a Saturday. And we had taken some time, to be honest, to assess what was there, what structures were there, equipment and things like that. But we knew we really needed some help. So we attended a local church near the ranch, and we asked the pastor at the end of the service, could he make an announcement if there was any ranchers or someone who knew about ranching. And he kind of gave us a funny look. And he said, okay, I'll do that. And he quickly gave the announcement, and everybody turned around, and hands went up from everyone, even little kids. They were such great people, and we are still in touch with them. The whole community has kind of taken us under their wing, and said, okay, what do you need? I've got some feed in the car. Do you need this? Do you need that? Let's help you. Let's go out. And people came to our ranch and gave us ideas and gave us things to think about. And that's how we started, really. Just the community came out. So I think the community is so important. It's a bit overwhelming. We continue to attend that church. And many people at the church are on speed dial for us.
Were they people who had previously known or worked with your father-in-law, or was it just completely new connections?
Completely new connections. He went to another church. He was very quiet, and he was kind of a person to himself. When I took the little kids there once, I think at Thanksgiving, he told us to stay away from the cows and any animal because they could hurt us, especially with little kids. And I said, okay. So I pretty much stayed close by and kind of had tabs on everything. So I think that made me even more nervous when I thought about this whole idea. And then right after we talked to the folks at the church and they helped us out, I think it was 2 weeks later, we received a phone call saying that the ranch behind us had a fire that was now moving up through our property, and we needed to get there very quickly. And by the time we got there, it engulfed 2/3 of the property. And that was enormous. It was another thing we didn't even think about. It was about fire and if that was a possibility. And it was just an accident from another ranch that came over due to a bird, apparently. So that was pecking on the wires that started the ranch, the spark, and then it took over from that. So again, another situation that kind of threw us for a loop. So we had to learn quick and figure this thing out.
Are horn flies stressing your cattle? Make fly control one and done with Alticid IGR XRB. Alticid IGR XRB delivers season-long horn fly control from a single application bolus, providing up to 195 days of relief, regardless of mineral consumption or location. It breaks the hornfly life cycle with no impact on beneficial insects, giving a flexible, consistent control. Learn more at cargillanimalnutrition.com/Alticid bolus, and that link will be in the description. So your primary experience with cattle was your father-in-law saying, stay away, be careful, they could hurt you. What flipped that switch in your mind where you could be like, well, maybe they can be gentle, maybe they're not all mean? What gave you that curiosity or what made that change for you?
So as a nurse, and many nurses, if they're listening to this, they're very good observers, especially intensive care nurses. So if there's a twitch after a trauma, if there's a movement, we always look for things like that so we can jump in and find it. And for me, I just transferred those abilities and started really focusing on the cows and trying to think about what they're thinking and what they like and what they don't like. And was I doing the right thing? I didn't want to get them stressed, just kind of normal thinking. So I kind of took those nursing capabilities and observations, and I saw large animals that were seeming pretty emotional and were very quiet. Again, they would just bunch for a long time and watch people, and they also seemed to be very curious too of me. So then I became less afraid and more to try to understand cows. And separate cows, I saw different personalities and different roles that the cows are actually doing. And that was also fascinating to me. So I just kind of followed that thread of curiosity and got to know them better. Now they say you shouldn't really name your cows. But people would come over and name their cows, and I'm like, no, don't do that. But yes, so that's kind of where it came from, the curiosity and seeing that they didn't seem to be something that would be difficult or would hurt us in any way. They just seemed to be very curious about us and wanted to understand us, so it made me want to understand them better.
So in your own personal, we'll call it research or curiosity, where you were playing music and showing paintings to learn what colors they like, were you doing any research on what other animal behavioralists had been researching? Like, do you look into anything Temple Grandin has done or anyone else?
Yes, Temple Grandin, and then there's another lady that's in the Cotswolds in England. She has kind of a menagerie of chickens and different animals along with her cows. And she explained, because she'd been cattle ranching by herself for about 20 years, she knew all about these interactions, and I was fascinated. And then Temple Grandin, how she made changes in the structure of how cattle chutes are kind of semicircle, and that is because it decreases the stress when cows can look at other cows. So a direct chute is more intimidating and more stressful to the cow than what Grandin came up with. Fascinating book, really was, very interesting. It wasn't for a while that I actually looked at the research, but there's so much research out there now. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. So with you starting to play music to the cattle, you talked briefly about, that first experience of you played different kinds of musics and you landed on Bach and the cello, and the cows came up to that, and you try and play that during stressful events, whether it's loading on the trailer, and my mind, weaning comes to my mind, or anything like that. Remind me how or why you decided, I'm going to play music to these cows and see how they respond.
Yeah, when I realized that the cows liked the cello, we kind of got into a routine. So they would eat, listen to cello music by Yo-Yo Ma. After that, they would take a drink of water, and then they would go over to the shaded areas, sway a little bit. Their eyes would get kind of sleepy looking, and then in about 20 minutes, everyone would go down. The whole herd would just be listening. So I kind of felt like I was, wanted to join them. So I would grab a bucket, flip it over, and just enjoy the music with them. And it was so calming and so relaxing. I decided, it would be fun to play the cello. I played other instruments, but never the cello. Decided to take cello lessons. And I told my teacher, I'm just playing for the cattle. I don't want to play concerts, and I don't want to play other things like that or different locations. I just want to play for the cattle. And so after about 10 months, I said, okay, I'm ready for Bach. And she laughed. She said, no, you can't do Bach. You've only been playing for 10 months. And so I said, well, let me give it a try. There's one song they like, which is Solo Sonata in G by Bach, that the other kind of slang name for it is the cello song, and they absolutely like that one. I said, let's try that one. So she came back the next week and kind of reluctantly said, okay, let's just give a few bars a chance, because it's a lot with the fingering and the bowing, and the cello is about my size too, so it's kind of a big instrument as well. So I did give it a try. I did get through maybe a quarter of it and was so excited. Took my cello, my student cello, back to the ranch and started playing that same song. And at first they came up and they're really close because they'd never heard it live. But then I started making some mistakes. And there's tweaking, and then there was the bowing issue and all the stuff that she had told me about. And then I got nervous, and the cows, first they reacted. The ears went up, and then they turned their head, and then they kind of shuffled a little bit. And so I was kind of getting the feeling that they wanted Yo-Yo Ma back and not me, which is fine because he's a professional cellist. But so that kind of came to the end of playing for them. But I did enjoy the experience. I thought it was a lot of fun. But I have discerning cows, apparently, Yo-Yo Ma enthusiasts, so we went back to the old routine, which they loved.
What about the paintings and discovering what colors the cows like? I mean, you shared one applicable example where, someone who switched on their flags, they switched to yellow flags so the cattle can see it better. What other findings do you have to share there that ranchers can directly apply?
Well, as an artist, I thought it would be just a fun thing to put art inside the corral. So we have kind of a large corral, and I put very good art, very sellable art hanging inside the corral. And a little nervous about that because I wasn't sure how they would react. But I opened the gate, let the cows come in, and they looked around pretty quickly, but then they just went straight for this one painting. And it was yellow daffodils. Now, there's no daffodils on our ranch at all. So I was really surprised. So that's when I started thinking, why daffodils? Why yellow? So I took the larger cows out, and then I put the calves in separately because they weren't there the first time, and locked the gate and let them look around, and they did the same thing. They went straight for that same painting. So I said, there's got to be something here that they all connect to. Maybe this flower, not sure, but definitely the color yellow. And that's when I did some research to find out they do indeed can see yellow well. They can see other colors, but yellow and blue are probably the two that they like. And yet blue makes sense because they can definitely read clouds and understand weather patterns probably better than we can and faster than we can. So I'm always looking at the cows to make a decision if it's overcast like it is. So,
well, Kim, I've enjoyed our conversation and I enjoyed reading your book. It was an easy read and a new but I enjoyed that because I feel like whenever I have time to read, I'm usually tired. So if it's not an easy read, it's hard for me to get through more than a couple pages. But I enjoyed reading your book, and it was definitely a new perspective, but one that I appreciated. So if there's one thing you want ranchers to remember about our conversation today, what would that be? Whether it's about being curious about the cows or helping other ranchers, what do you want that one thing to be?
Actually, both. I think continue to be curious. Don't really get into your ways. There might be cows that are just different, and you never know. It's always good to question and be curious. And the other thing is really just help out new ranchers coming into the area. Just like our situation, maybe people had less experience, maybe had a little experience, but kind of helping them along the way. Know that you're kind of arm in arm if you're in a community of cattle ranching, and tell them to network with other ranchers, maybe join local or national groups such as professional cattle raising associations or their ag office. Connect them with people or services that they might need, and just be a really good listener to see what would be most helpful for them at that point. The people that did that for us I was just so grateful to continue with, the relationship and help them if we could, and for any reason. We just wanted to be there for them because they were definitely there for us. It was quite a thing.
All right. And Kim, if listeners are curious and want to read your book, where can they go to find that?
Yes. So the books can be ordered through the website. The website is www.insightskj.com. So let me tell you that again. It's www.insights, with an S on the end, kj.com. No spaces. The books are $12 plus shipping. You can reach me through the contact area of the website with any questions that you have. Please include your contact information so I can get back to you and quickly send the book. And then on the website are some pictures that are found in the books and some discussion about cattle preferences and insights, including some economic information too that would be helpful. I've included a lot of research related to the insights, and I focus a little bit more on the music situation since there seems to be more and more research about that topic. So I'm really thrilled that you're interested in my book, To the Barn and Bach. I know people keep thinking, no, I think she spelled it wrong. I think it's the Bach, To the Barn and Bach. And I'm like, no, you have to read the book about the Bach part. And it doesn't seem to go with cattle raising, but then they get it after they read it. So I wish all the best to ranchers and cattle raisers that are learning and growing and trying to understand their cattle as best as they can, and to lower their anxiety levels so that they feel comfortable and have great babies and calves. So.
All right. Well, that link will be included in the show note. Folks, remember the best way to support this podcast and all your other favorite podcasts is to leave a rating or review, and better yet, share it with a friend who's going to find this conversation interesting and valuable, because podcasts do still grow best by word of mouth. And with that, happy ranching, folks.